XRP price surging 20% within 24 hours. Let's dive into what's actually transpiring. I've got a massive amount of XRP-related news to cover. We received the new Messari report for Q4 2025. What's contained within it, I'm going to break it down for you. We're also going to examine a ton of other XRP and crypto-related news. If you extract any value from this, can I get an amen? I'm just kidding. Can I get a like button hit? No, I don't need the amen. I need that like. All right, let's continue here with the analysis. XRP outpaced the broader cryptocurrency market on Friday, February 6th, rallying more than 20% within a 24-hour period. The token traded at 150, briefly touching 1.53 here during the session, with market capitalization rising roughly to $91.3 billion. Also strengthening significantly, XRP also gained strength against Bitcoin, gaining over 13% on the BTC trading pair, according to CoinGecko data. Meanwhile, 24-hour trading volume jumped dramatically to $16.5 billion. The rally followed improving investor sentiment after a series of announcements from Ripple, including a teaser of major upgrades to the XRP ledger, revealed February 5th, which I broke down in comprehensive detail. Those are some genuinely significant upgrades. Things are getting serious now. I know we've been discussing XRP for years on this channel, but where the state of the XRP ledger currently is, it is primed and ready for institutional use case and adoption. And I wouldn't be shocked to hear more announcements, more banking institutions, more corporations coming in and utilizing the technology. I'm genuinely excited to discuss that. Let's continue here with the market overview. We closed the day at $43.4 million in trading volume. We're heading into the weekend. I'm not sure how people are feeling emotionally, but $1.2 trillion was added back into the stock market today. I know my dad was really distressed yesterday. Hopefully he's a little bit happier today. He looked at his portfolio yesterday and he's like, oh my God, this is terrible. Now he looks at his portfolio and says, wow, we recovered. I mean, this is precisely why, on bad market days, just stay away from looking at the price action in your portfolio, right? Because when you examine things and it's down significantly, you start to panic emotionally. And you shouldn't panic, but a lot of people do naturally, right? And that's an understandable human emotion. But when people start to panic, they start making decisions not based on the underlying technology, what's transpiring with the technology and adoption rates and regulatory developments. They make those decisions based off of fear. And you don't ever want to be operating in a position of fear, especially when it comes to financial decisions. So make sure that you are taking into consideration all of those fundamental factors. And I hope you are making the best out of, these market situations, right? XRP going from $1.80 to $1.10 in a matter of a few weeks. That is a 70-cent opportunity differential, right? Where if you had $1,000, you were buying maybe, 550 XRP at the top. Now you're buying, 900. It's genuinely a significant difference. And then if you take a look here at ISO 2022 tokens, they have been rebounding the best here in this recovery. So you got XRP leading the charge. You got ADA here rebounding strongly. You got XLM coming back. You got HBAR here at 9.6 cents. Algorand's at 10 cents, Quant at 67 others, XDC is at almost 3.8 cents here, and IOTA is at 7.5 cents. There is opportunity anywhere you look in the cryptocurrency market. The problem is, does retail have enough extra funds sitting on the sideline to make a substantial difference? Data shows selling could potentially pull back Bitcoin to $50,000 levels. Some companies that stockpile cryptocurrency could boost their share prices that are now under stress and pressure. MicroStrategy, the Bitcoin holding company, is nearly down 50% from highs. Firms without real business revenue generation may be forced to sell crypto holdings just to survive operationally, adding more pressure to the market. Recent sales by certain companies show that this risk is genuinely real. If more firms sell holdings, falling stock prices and ETF outflows could drag Bitcoin toward $50,000 to $55,000, while better funded companies are in a safer position. Remember, with corporate treasury strategies, we haven't really proven that this model is long-lasting, right? It's still kind of new and experimental. And some companies are going to go the way of the dodo bird. They're just going to disappear from existence completely. Some companies will remain for years or decades to come. who will be the winners and who will be the losers. I'd imagine there'll be more losers than winners. That's just how markets operate historically. And hopefully you pick the right company to invest in. All right, insane recovery here. Let's keep up with the momentum. Flares back to just above 1 cent. Insane recovery happening. I mean, what are we talking about here? In the last 7 days, 18.7% gain. In 24 hours, 13.7% gain. It went from like 0.09, 9/10 of a cent to a full cent. Insane recovery trajectory. Love it. All right, good energy there. Now let's dive into the Messari report that was highlighted. Here's the Messari report. It is extensive and comprehensive. The first bit of the report just kind of discusses what XRP Ledger is fundamentally and a little bit of the technical features. And then it gets into US spot ETFs, which were like the highlight of the entire report. It talks about digital asset treasuries and corporate adoption. It talks about XRP burn mechanisms and escrow releases. Lots of great charting and data visualization. It talks about XRP ledger addresses and growth. It gets into Q4 average daily transactions and liquidity hubs, AMMs, validator servers. I mean, there's a lot here. And if you want to spend, an hour of your day going through all the detailed data, you definitely can. Here are some of the key highlights from the report that matter. XRP ETFs launched in November 2025. Reaching $1 billion in assets under management in less than 4 weeks, the fastest to achieve this milestone since Ethereum ETFs. RLUSD market cap on the XRP ledger is up 164% quarter over quarter to $235 million. Real-world assets market cap on the XRP ledger is up 37% quarter over quarter to $281 million. This is, remember, through the end of Q4 2025. And then average daily transactions up 3.1% quarter over quarter to 1.83 million transactions daily. Like I said, if you want the full comprehensive report, I will make sure it is linked down in the description. Best of luck here analyzing it. Messari, they have a lot of great information and research, but I know that the founder of Messari isn't a huge Ripple, XRP, and Brad Garlinghouse fan historically. So I always kind of take what they're saying with a grain of salt. But it is a lot of detailed information, and it will help you better understand the growth or the lack of growth in some specific areas on the XRP ledger infrastructure. All right, tokenized diamonds did hit the XRP ledger recently. Since, real-world assets was a part of this report, I wanted to at least show you that $280 million is coming onto the XRP ledger in tokenized diamonds, which I thought was pretty cool and innovative. The XRP ledger is expanding its partnerships in the real-world asset ecosystem significantly. ARX, Zonix, Kix, Axelar. Remember, they just acquired Palisade recently, OpenEden, Ondo, Ripple itself. I mean, they're all here working together collaboratively. And then, of course, if you're looking at the total value here on the XRP ledger, represented value is $1.45 billion. And then if you take a look here, you can examine kind of who has the most value represented, back token here at $861 million. And then as you can observe here, some of this value, this tokenized value, is distributed here. And then things just kind of, it changes here automatically. I see what it's doing. It's changing dynamically. I'm like, I'm not hitting the button. Is there a ghost in the machine? Why does it keep changing by itself? All right, let's continue here. We're talking about institutional adoption. And we are on, what seems to be the cusp of major institutional adoption. David Schwartz had some interesting comments about this that I want to share. I feel like we really are on the cusp of mass institutional adoption, both of DeFi and of other blockchain technologies. I think this is also like one of the key obstacles to mass retail adoption that we need to overcome. A lot of people in the space previously thought that retail adoption was like the big wave that would drive everything, but I think institutional adoption is a necessary precursor. You have to connect to where people are currently. You have to go to where the value currently exists. You can't build a new financial system from zero while ignoring the existing financial system where everybody's money is, where all the value is concentrated. Where the real world, trillions of dollars in value currently sits. You can't just say, forget about all that existing infrastructure. Let's just build something completely new over here in isolation. That doesn't work practically. And so I think this wave of institutional adoption over the next year or two is going to be what's going to pave the way for mass retail adoption subsequently. And then we can deliver on those ambitious promises, like we all want to bank the unbanked, but like the unbanked, they have to be able to spend their money to buy groceries and pay their phone bill. And so we have to have that institutional connectivity first. And I don't think there are any fundamental obstacles preventing this. I think that's achievable, and I think this conference demonstrates that progress. All right, let's continue on. There's another clip here I wanted to play from the same discussion. Yeah, that's exactly right. The idea that institutions can build things that are very strictly, tightly regulated, things like loan portfolios of traditional loans that are heavily regulated, but they can interoperate with DeFi systems seamlessly. So for example, you might have a regulated lender who issues very traditional real estate or commercial loans, and then you might have tokenization of that debt that then anyone can hold in a purely DeFi system environment. And I think if you look at like the way systems grow historically, if you look at the way the internet grew, there was government and military adoption initially that enabled grassroots adoption that built the system. That synergy is what really builds something that can be dominant, that can really grow exponentially. And I think we see that corner turning. We see the XRP ledger as being a blockchain where those kinds of use cases can really work effectively. Yeah, absolutely. Do any of you guys remember when the internet just first started becoming mainstream? I mean, maybe not when it just first started technologically, but like MSN Messenger, Yahoo Messenger, those are the days where, oh man, kids today don't have any clue how bad it used to be, like how slow internet used to be. Remember, you'd just download a file and it would take 10 hours, 24 hours, sometimes days. Oh, it's good nostalgic stuff. These documents explain why XRP is built specifically for Tier 1 banking institutions. Ripple already operates with over 100 banks, including major Tier 1 institutions, covering 80% of global trade corridors, proving the network functions at true global scale. Actually covering 90% now of the foreign exchange market. Central banks across the world have openly discussed Ripple and XRP for integration, demonstrating institutional credibility, regulatory alignment, and system-level reliance. This positions XRP within the scope of infrastructure considered suitable for Tier 1 banking environments. Banks face high capital requirements under Basel III regulations, locking up large amounts of funds during cross-border payment processes. XRP, as a bridge asset, helps Tier 1 banks meet Basel III requirements by reducing the need for pre-funded nostro accounts, freeing trapped capital, and improving balance sheet efficiency significantly. The combination of global bank adoption, central bank engagement, and Basel-aligned liquidity design positions XRP as truly ready for Tier 1 banking institutions. Now, just a little bit about this practically. You have trillions of dollars locked up around the world to service this old legacy correspondent banking system. That's trillions of dollars you could be earning interest on productively. And just 2%, 3%, 4% interest on that capital is tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars per year potentially, right? Tens of billions of dollars, depending how much money is locked up. And then it could scale to hundreds of billions of dollars annually, right? We examined this data, maybe last week in detail. And when are financial institutions going to start taking advantage of that efficiency opportunity? Now, the answer to that question is when regulatory oversight allows them to confidently, right? I think institutions clearly see the opportunity, but they want to make absolutely sure that they are operating within the legal bounds of what they're able to do and not do in the crypto space. And so I think giving them clear understanding, clear rules of the road will help them move considerably faster into the space. I think once they get a taste of this, instant settlement transfers, yield generation on their capital where they're earning billions of dollars per institution annually, right? That is going to be a major use case for expanding this technology to pretty much everything that banks currently do. Kind of like how artificial intelligence is transforming how companies operate. And businesses are operating currently. If you own a business and you're not using AI tools, you're probably at a huge disadvantage because the company across the street that's competing with you directly, they're probably using AI extensively, right? It's the same dynamic with blockchain technology, right? If your banking institution is using the technology, you have all of these competitive advantages. The bank across the street that's not doing that, well, they're going to start losing customers because people want instant transfers. They want to be able to get, access to their money 24/7 around the clock. They want to be able to save money on sending money to friends and family and remittances and those types of transactions. And if their bank is going to offer those superior services, they're going to be very, very happy customers. Now, I found this video while looking, I was searching for some content to discuss about the XRP ledger, and this clip just stood out to me. So I wanted to play it and get your thoughts about this particular clip. Okay, here we go. Let me back you up on that statement. So what people need to understand is, okay, so we know XRP is going to bridge the money for the Bank of England. And if people do their research on XRP, they know that FedNow is literally built on the XRP ledger. FedNow is the modernization of the payment system in the US, and it's using XRP ledger technology. That's a fact. They were chosen by the Faster Payments Task Force years ago. Ripple was the chosen company to modernize the payment system. It's a long story, very deep rabbit hole, but if you do your research, you come to the conclusion that FedNow runs on Ripple technology. So what people don't realize here when people say that XRP cannot go to $10 trillion, $20 trillion, $100 trillion market cap, and they can't flip Bitcoin. Well, let me tell you something, and I would like to know how you're going to argue against this one. The Bank of England is one central bank out of 170 central banks globally. There's 170 to 180 central banks in the world. We know that the Bank of England is a paid customer of Ripple for over 6 years now. We know Bank of England will settle with XRP. Same for the Federal Reserve and same for the Hong Kong Monetary Authority and majority of central banks, all central banks. We know they're going to settle cross-border through XRP. The Bank of England is one central bank out of 180 central banks that will be using XRP. This guy's so distracting with his movements. He's like a cheerleader or something enthusiastic. We know that the Bank of England is a paid customer of Ripple for over 6 years now. We know Bank of England will settle with XRP. Same for the Federal Reserve and same for the Hong Kong Monetary Authority and majority of central banks. We know they're going to settle cross-border through XRP. The Bank of England is one central bank out of 180 central banks that will be using XRP, and it does more transaction volume in one day than Bitcoin does in a whole year. And this is one central bank. There's 170 to 180 central banks in the world, not all as large as the Bank of England. The Bank of England does more volume in one day than Bitcoin does in a whole year, and it's going to use XRP to settle transactions. Its CBDC is being built on the private CBDC platform that Ripple has that allows central banks to build CBDCs on the XRP ledger. These are private CBDC ledgers that they're using to build digital currencies. And when it comes to settling cross-border, they have to use the XRP public ledger. They have to touch a public ledger for interoperability. And the Bank of England does more volume in one day than Bitcoin does in a whole year. And this is one central bank. So don't tell me that XRP can't go to $50 or higher. If you're saying it can't, okay, you don't know the facts, you haven't done your research properly, and it's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person. Okay, I'm very confused by some of these claims. FedNow is not a blockchain-based system. It's a centralized real-time gross settlement system, serviced and operated by the Federal Reserve using traditional payment infrastructure. Now, does FedNow have anything to do with Ripple and XRP? I think Ripple is connected into FedNow through certain partners and integration points, and I believe Ripple will be connected into FedNow once they get their banking infrastructure and potentially a FedMaster account. But saying that the FedNow system is built on the XRP ledger is not accurate in my personal opinion and understanding. This topic around the XRP community is so important to separate confirmed facts from hype and speculation. There's no official direct partnership between the Federal Reserve FedNow system and Ripple and XRP. However, there are some indirect connections from my understanding. FedNow is the Federal Reserve's centralized payment system that launched in July 2023. It does not use XRP or the XRP ledger or Ripple's technology as part of its core infrastructure. Who you listen to is very important in the crypto information space. I'm always going to bring you the facts as I know them. I'm not here to give you hype and promises and moonshot predictions. I don't know what is going on with this clip exactly, but I really wanted to play it and just show you in real time some of the stuff that might not be fully accurate. Now, maybe there's a place where this person comes on and explains why he believes these things are happening, but just be careful, guys. Let me add some additional context about why distinguishing facts from speculation matters so much. In the crypto space, especially around XRP, there's a tendency for narratives to get exaggerated as they spread through social media. Someone makes a reasonable observation about Ripple working with financial institutions. Then someone else interprets that as Ripple definitely being used by central banks. Then someone else interprets that as XRP is definitely the settlement asset for all central banks. And before you know it, speculation has become accepted fact in certain communities. This is dangerous because it sets unrealistic expectations and can lead to poor investment decisions. What we can confirm is that Ripple has partnerships with numerous financial institutions globally. We can confirm that some central banks have piloted or explored Ripple's technology for CBDC development. We can confirm that RippleNet facilitates cross-border payments for institutional clients. But we should be careful about claiming that specific central banks are definitely using XRP as a settlement asset unless we have official confirmation. The difference matters because one is verifiable fact and the other is speculation. The Messari report data I shared earlier is the kind of factual information that's useful. Real metrics about transaction volumes, real data about RLUSD growth, real statistics about real-world asset tokenization on XRPL. These are verifiable numbers that help us understand actual adoption and usage. That's the kind of analysis that should inform investment decisions, not speculative claims about what might happen or what we hope will happen. The institutional adoption theme that David Schwartz discussed is genuinely important. He's right that institutional infrastructure needs to be built before mass retail adoption can happen sustainably. You can't have millions of retail users trying to buy groceries with crypto if there's no institutional connectivity to make that practical. The payment rails, the regulatory compliance, the banking integration, all of that has to be built first. And that's exactly what's happening now with projects like XRPL. The Basel III point about trapped capital in Nostro accounts is factual and important. Banks do lock up trillions in pre-funded accounts to facilitate cross-border payments. Any technology that reduces that requirement does free up capital that could be earning returns elsewhere. That's a real efficiency gain that banks care about. Whether they'll use XRP specifically for that purpose depends on regulatory clarity, risk management considerations, and competitive dynamics. But the use case is valid. The 20% price surge we saw is interesting because it came after Ripple announced technology upgrades and amid improving market sentiment. But sustainable price appreciation will ultimately depend on continued adoption, regulatory developments, and overall market conditions. One-day pumps are exciting but don't necessarily indicate trend changes. What matters more is whether institutional usage continues growing, whether regulatory clarity arrives, and whether the technology continues improving. The tokenized diamonds and real-world asset growth on XRPL is genuinely significant because it shows the platform expanding beyond just payments. If XRPL becomes a hub for diverse asset classes, that creates more use cases, more network effects, more reasons for institutions to integrate. The 280 million in tokenized diamonds is a good start, but the real question is whether this scales to billions and eventually trillions in diverse asset classes. The ETF data from Messari is particularly interesting because it shows institutional demand through regulated products. Reaching $1 billion AUM in under 4 weeks is impressive and suggests real institutional interest. But ETFs are just one vector for institutional adoption. Direct usage of XRP and XRPL by banks and payment providers for actual operational purposes is arguably more important long-term than ETF investment flows. So to summarize what we know versus what we hope, we know XRP had a strong 20% rally. We know Ripple announced technology upgrades. We know Messari data shows growth in several key metrics. We know institutional infrastructure is being built. We know real-world assets are coming to XRPL. We know David Schwartz believes institutional adoption is the necessary precursor to mass retail adoption. What we hope is that this leads to sustained price appreciation, that regulatory clarity arrives soon, that institutional usage continues accelerating, and that XRPL becomes critical infrastructure for global finance. Hope is important for conviction, But hope should be based on realistic assessment of facts, not wild speculation. I thought that was an important distinction to make, which is why I wanted to play that clip showing the difference between factual analysis and speculative hype. All right, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. If you got any value from this analysis, like, share, comment what you think about this. Make sure you're doing your own research and verifying claims you hear. Bye.